Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. But today I'm going to be breaking down the full disclosure of extraterrestrial life on the planet and how it's going to cause a disenchantment within the infrastructure of Western civilization. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you already know what time it is. It's time to get those notes out. It's time to shut down the paradigm of the deep state shadow government, right? So there's a publication that recently came out, and it's basically talking about how the Vatican is preparing guidelines and apparitions and other supernatural phenomena. Apparitions are appearances or communication with divine beings such as saints, angels, or Christ himself. So could this basically be the segue for Project Bluebeam, right? Because we all know that westernized technology lines up with everything according to prophetic divination to hide the fact that we're going through a transmutation process, which is what we call the shift, right? So when you see this publication also, it says the Vatican is preparing to release a document giving guidance on how to discern supernatural phenomenon. The Holy See Press Office announced upcoming document will be published May 17th with a live stream press conference featuring Perfect for the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, right? And then you got Ferdinand has previously said in the process of finalizing the next text, the clear guidelines and norms for the discernment of apparitions and other phenomena according to the National Catholic Register. So all this stuff is taking place. Now, for those who don't understand what an apparition is basically like a ghost-like entity, right? Which is a phantom, a specter, a spirit. So this is all based on a supernatural of six ether energy, right? Six ether is acclimated to the ghost entities that are basically hold corporeal form to where they can basically infiltrate certain dimensions. So now notice they said that the press conference is going to be published on May 17th, right? Now this is in correlation to the solar eclipse that took place, right? So when you go talking about the solar eclipse, when you go to this passage in the Bible, when you look at theological context, it says this, Jonah 3:4, and it goes down to in 40 days, Nineveh, which is a nomenclature title for America, shall be overthrown, because Nineveh is connected to the Assyrian Empire, which is connected to Babylon, and America is Mystery Babylon. So it says 40 days in America, Mystery Babylon shall be overthrown. And 40 days from the solar eclipse was the Pentecost. 40 days from the solar eclipse on April 8th, you get Saturday, May 18th of 2024. So the day before May 18th, when they said that Nineveh, America, Babylon shall be overthrown, is where you have the press conference talking about how the Vatican is going to be giving guidelines for people to understand apparitions and other supernatural phenomena on the planet. Because also you cannot negate the fact that during the time of the solar eclipse, that's when CERN was activated. CERN was able to project these interdimensional parasitical entities to the planet during the time of the solar eclipse, right? So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff is in correlation. It's not a coincidence. And also, this lines up to the so-called prophecies when you're talking about the Simpsons cartoon, when you go to season 16, episode 19, and it's called Thank God It's Doomsday. So you also got 5:18 right here, which is in connection to 40 days from April 8th of 2024, which is May 18th, right? 5:18, right? So it's also at the top, you got 144,000, which is not a coincidence, because we all know that the binary code system of the matrix, that everything within the simulation is mathematical. Everything in the universe is mathematical. Everything is based on synchronicities. Everything is based on a numerical sequence. So it's not a coincidence also that you got a publication by space.com. It says signs of alien life will be found by 2025 NASA's chief scientists, right? Humanity is on the verge of discovering alien life. High-ranking NASA scientists say, I think we're going to have a strong indications of alien life on the planet. You also have another publication talking about the emergency action plan for alien invasion on Earth. What could happen if extraterrestrial beings decide to invade Earth, right? So they are preparing. This is all, a form of preparation. This is all premeditated. They're trying to prepare for something, right? So you also cannot negate the fact that you got schools doing drills and simulations preparing for an alien invasion. Wyoming schools unprepared for space alien invasion, but Maryland's aren't. So all this stuff is taking place. And see, you got the poor baby on the ground, and they got him acting like it's a tornado drill taking place. But the extraterrestrials, if you have an extraterrestrial invasion, they don't give a damn about you punching over like that. That's not going to stop it. So you also have the press conference. So it talks about how the Vatican holds a conference on extraterrestrial life, right? And it says right here verbatim, though it may seem unlikely location to happen upon conference astrobiology, the Vatican recently study week over 30 astronomers, biologists, geologists, and religious leaders to discuss the existence of extraterrestrials. So that's not a coincidence that all the stuff is taking place. Not a coincidence, because why would you round up so many professionals to talk about this phenomenon that's taking place? The conference was meant to focus on the scientific perspective on the subject of the existence of extraterrestrial life and pulled in perspectives from atheist scientists, Catholic leaders alike. So it's not a coincidence as all this stuff is taking place in the house, all connected to the Vatican. The Vatican is preparing statement on extraterrestrial life, and it tells you right here, reportedly preparing for a major world statement about extraterrestrial life and its theological implications. So also, when you look at this publication, the Vatican scientific interest extraterrestrial life was publicly revealed for the first time in May of 2008, when the head of the Vatican Observatory, Gabriel Funes, also a Jesuit, gave an interview to the Vatican newspaper. So the extraterrestrials are my brothers. It's just here to the creatures on Earth. So they're giving you the reality. You got so many publications. I got so many receipts. The receipts are receipting. The math is mathing. So the Vatican tries to get a step ahead on extraterrestrial issues before announcements made by world governments. The Vatican is playing a leading role preparing for the world for disclosure about extraterrestrials. So there's a few things, you know what I'm saying, to basically that basically aligns up with everything I'm telling you. So it's not a coincidence that when you look at the geoglyph sigils on the Pope's garments, it shows you the sigil of an extraterrestrial on his garments. And it's also emulating the crop circle that you see at the bottom right here. Not a coincidence. because all this stuff takes place when you understand ontological artifacts. So you got the ontological artifacts. When you look at the sigil at the top in the Vatican, it shows you a UFO at the top right here as well. Oh, let me put my phone on silent here for a second. Because one thing you got to understand is that ontological artifacts is a form of iconography that proves extraterrestrial life. So this also coincides with the frequencies in the existence of the Vatican secrets, right? The Vatican holds 50 plus miles of shelving documents, which contain various ancient documents. And of course, it is hidden to the public. No browsing is allowed. Only selected scholars may view certain documents upon request due to its high level of secrecy, right? And then you have theories surrounding these archives include historical records of your so-called Jesus, church involvement in wars, banks, biblical relics, extraterrestrial life, and alien beings on the planet. So now I'm going to show you a video of a whistleblower talking about her experience at the Vatican.
I have a lot of friends at the Vatican, and I was let in because that's what I do. And I have a PhD. You have to go through a whole series of checkpoints in order to get in. Okay. Barely anybody could get in there to read these documents. These documents are really old. Some of them would disintegrate, right, if you touch them. So you have to be careful with them. You have a whole wall of something that's called extraterrestrial research into extraterrestrials. And I was like, I'm starting here. There's a great book by Brother Guy Contomagno and his friend who's a Jesuit, who's a Father Mueller, and it's called Would You Baptize an Extraterrestrial? And that goes along and talks about the whole history of extraterrestrial belief within the Catholic Church, basically. But if you look at the history of Catholicism and you look at, like, especially people in the Vatican, they know about Emanuel Swedenborg, who's talking about angels and people on Venus and things like this in 1750. There was a best-selling book called Life on Other Planets.
So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff is taking place. Everything basically lines up. Also within the Vatican, you have, like I said, you have ontological artifacts, right? This is a painting from the 6th and the 7th century, and it shows you a UFO at the top. All this stuff is coming from the Vatican. You got some stuff that leaked out from the Vatican. You got a lot of books that was a part of the Vatican. We're going to get into the fact that when you're talking about the book of Enoch, the book of Enoch was basically redacted in 1408 when the Vatican hired Thomas Arundel, because the Vatican, they understand the fact that when you read the book of Enoch, they're talking about extraterrestrial beings. It's talking about the extraterrestrial beings, or you're talking about the 200 fallen angels. The 200 fallen angels are known as the cherubim. The cherubim is also known as the Nephala. Nephala comes from the Nephilim, right? Which is also the 1/3 of the galaxy that was basically kicked out of the so-called heavens, which is connected to the Orion star constellation. 1/3 of the heavens kicked out by Anu by going against galactical order. So those 200 fallen angels are basically extraterrestrial beings that is talked about in the book of Enoch. We finna get into that later. So it tells you about, like I said, they got many different artifacts and relics and sigils and many different manuscripts in the Vatican that talks about extraterrestrial existence on the planet, right? And this is from the Vatican Vault, item 1489. On April 14, 1561, a battle involving a variety of strange objects took place over Nuremberg. Those that hit the ground turned to steam. This is a helmet that was found on scorched earth. So this is one of the helmets that was found. And also, we're going to get into why did the Vatican remove the book of Enoch, right? Because anytime when it comes to westernized monotheistic religious systems, if it's not parallel to everything that they're talking about from a biblical standpoint, it's basically going to be redacted. So it says right here, it is inconsistent with the teachings of the Torah, right? So You also had another infiltrator of the Vatican. There's a guy that infiltrated the Vatican.
Grows freely, but
And this guy, I think he's from Russia, so you gotta, kind of get, acclimated to his way of speech. But he's basically talking about this guy who was a KGB member, and he basically infiltrated the Vatican and stole some archives. I'm gonna play it.
make a request for what exact books they are looking for. But one man who was able to explore the archive was a Russian scientist by the name of Genrik Mavrikevich Ludwig, who was supposedly also an architect, philosopher, and a scholar of ancient languages. According to the story published in the Russian magazine Soverencheno Sekretno in 2011, authored by the journalist Vladimir Kushturians, Genrik Mavrikevich Ludwig gained special access to the secret archives in 1920s, where he studied ancient manuscripts. There, he read about extraterrestrials who had visited Earth in antiquity.
Hear what he said? He said he read manuscripts. When he infiltrated the Vatican, he read manuscripts talking about extraterrestrial existence.
About extraterrestrials who had visited Earth in antiquity and helped shape the direction of the ancient Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and even the Mayans. Subsequently, he began his research of the Maya civilization and interpreted their symbols to be spaceships and spacesuits. In addition, Professor Ludwig mentioned that the library contained manuscripts about alchemy and ancient codes. Ludwig took photographs of the manuscripts and collected the rest in memory to be written down as soon as he got home, as it was obviously not possible for him to smuggle any of the manuscripts out under the watchful eye of the Vatican guards. Vladimir mentions that Professor Ludwig showed his students photocopies of the Vatican's ancient manuscripts, containing information about extraterrestrials that had visited our planet with drawings, and described to them the hidden essence of ancient myths. He told them of the fiery pillar that destroyed an advanced ancient civilization. He showed the students photos of the fortress walls discovered in Babylon, melted with a horrendous temperature, and believed that a nuclear blast could be the cause of this. He was also apparently very at odds with Stalin's regime, which landed him in trouble on more than one occasion. And he was also known for his extensive knowledge of the occult and for his considerable esoteric knowledge. He had a vast knowledge of ancient Sumerian and Etruscan civilizations, and also of medicinal herbs. Betrayed by his wife, the NKVD secret police arrested him in 1938. Professor Ludwig was accused of being a Vatican spy and was promptly sent to one of Stalin's gulags. Ludwig survived the concentration camps and torture and carried his incredible knowledge and language skills. He was fluent in 20 languages, including ancient ones, ideals and beliefs with them throughout the years of suffering.
So he infiltrated the Vatican, stole archives, and you see he got arrested for it during the time period he was living. So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff took place. So one thing you gotta do, especially during this time period, during the time period of the Great Awakening, you really gotta have high spiritual discernment, right? That way you're able to decipher and delineate from what's real and what's fake, basically, right? Because as I was telling you before, westernized technology is basically an emulation of what takes place on a spiritual level on the planet, to where you're not able to discern if it's Project Bluebeam or if it's something really spiritual taking place on the planet. That's what you must decipher. That's where you have to get your mind in order. But in order to reap the benefits of those types of abilities, you got to do your shadow work, right? Because when you jump into certain knowledge, when you jump into consciousness, and when you jump into spirituality without doing your own shadow work to face your own trauma, basically, what happens is, it's going to put you in a state of a illusionary perspective, to where you're not able to see things for what it is, to where you're not able to tap into your intuitive abilities, right? So that's what it's all about. You got to be so intuitive to the point where you're able to discern what is happening on the planet. Is this Project Bluebeam, or is this something spiritual taking place? Because as I was telling you in the last video, we are going through a shift, right? We are going through a shift. So one thing you also got to understand about why the Vatican removed the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch talks about extraterrestrial beings and mermaids, right? And it says right here, when you go to the Book of Enoch 19:2, and the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens. Siren is another nomenclature title for a mermaid. Now I'm going to show you proof of this guy talking about mermaids in the video. And he was basically saying that they're basically black mermaids. So with that being said, hit that subscribe button, because you're not going to get this type of information anywhere, you know what I'm saying? Because everything is an esoteric puzzle piece. We basically bringing old information mixed in with the futuristic information and modernized information at the same time, right? So that's how you get to the inception of the truth. You got to understand the science of circumology, meaning that you study all perspectives to get one truth. That's the science of circumology. So I'm going to show you this video of this guy who's a whistleblower, and he's basically telling you his experience about seeing black mermaids or sirens, as I was telling you about how it's connected to the Book of Enoch, which is why it was redacted in 1408 by the Vatican when they hired Thomas Arundel. So as you can see, those are statues right there. Those are the statues that was put together, and he's basically giving his perspectives on how that's how big these mermaid beings that was inside the water. And he said that they were black women, right? But if you cannot hear the video, I'm going to basically tell you what he said verbatim during the course of the video if you cannot hear it correctly.
Most people perceive aliens to be white.
He said people perceive aliens to be white.
Because normally most people perceive aliens to be white. That's never when it's not the case. This particular group are called, and
he said that the perception of aliens being white is not true. And he said that the great majority, basically, of these extraterrestrial beings are actually so-called black, the ones that he encountered. He said he's seen them. He said they're very friendly, and he's been in contact with them. And he also said that they're not reptilian, they're amphibians, right? Meaning that they're connected to the frequency of water. They're a hybridized form of amphibian with scales in their black skin.
Else, on human culture, as well as existing relations of this planet.
So, with that being said, as we go back to the publication at the top, talking about the supernatural phenomenon and apparitions, talking about on May 17th, where the Vatican is going to hold a press conference. So it's one of those things where you cannot just negate just looking in the sky. You're going to see things in the ocean as well, because when you understand the Emerald Tablets and the principles of Tahuti, who is Thoth, or Quetzalcoatl, as above, so below. Everything that takes place in the cosmos is also works in synergy with the ocean, because only 3 to 5% of the ocean has been discovered, right? So it talks about, like I said, the Vatican preparing guidelines for apparitions and other supernatural phenomena. So you might see mermaids and things of that nature. You might see UFOs. It's not only subjected to spirits and things of that nature. Because like I said, we going through the shift. When you go through a shift, that's when the star Polaris merges in the third dimension with the fifth dimension, where dimensions basically collide, and the collision of those dimensions causes a quantum entanglement, which causes a quantum fluctuation, a glitch in the simulation. So you got many different ontological artifacts that lines up with everything that I'm saying. And now, I think I got another video. So it's not a coincidence. You know, you got the Pope meeting up with indigenous people, right? Because he knew that the indigenous people were connected to the inception point of meeting with extraterrestrial beings that come from different star systems and other dimensions, right? So this is the Pope meeting up with an indigenous person right here. I'm gonna play the video. Now you got to ask yourself, why is he meeting up with this person? What type of information that he's trying to extract from this person, from this indigenous black man, right? Why is he basically meeting up with these people, right? Because like I said, when you understand the inception of monotheistic religion, everything was basically extracted from the indigenous people. They got the edification from us, right? When you understand the blackamoors who were the sellouts, and when you understand the indigenous Mers that was connected to the land, that was also connected to Atlantis, right? Connected to Atlantis when you're talking about the Lemurians.
Mais je ne sais pas écrire, je ne sais pas lire, mais je peux juste écrire ma signature. Oui. Merci beaucoup.
So you got to ask yourself, why is the Pope meeting with these people?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
See, that's why I say you got to use discernment. He is not meeting with your favorite so-called demonic pastor. He's not meeting with TD Jakes. He's not meeting with your favorite celebrity. He's not meeting with Barack Obama. You see, he was meeting with an indigenous person, because the indigenous people have the esoteric information about extraterrestrial life on the planet, right? So I'm going to show you this video. So this is all going to be connected to the Lucifer telescope that basically sits on Mount Graham, because Mount Graham is basically an interstellar vortex portal to where the indigenous people had access to high galactical beings that come from different star systems, right? So you got the Lucifer telescope, which is basically a nomenclature title for a large binocular telescope near infrared utility with camera and integral field unit and extragalactical research. So the Lucifer telescope sits on Mount Graham. So does the Vatican know about the portal on a sacred Indian ground when you're talking about the indigenous people? So after Tom Horn and Chris Putnam publicly proclaimed that Pope Benedict would resign, the Vatican asked how they knew in advance. God told them. Now they've gotten a download on what is shortly going to happen in the Middle East. Following the release of their international bestseller, Exo Vatican, Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam were basically inundated with requests from around the world for interviews. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the Christianity concerning the Vatican's advanced telescope, which sits on top of Mount Graham in Arizona. Because we all know about Arizona. Arizona is a highly spiritual geographical landmass. When you're talking about the Sedona vortex, right? Because there's a lot of interstellar vortex portals that connects you to the space-time continuum, right? To where you're able to manipulate timelines and go into other dimensions. So the Vatican telescope which is also known as the Lucifer telescope, right? It's also known as the Lucifer telescope. And it's basically comprised of the two technological telescopes of the Galileo and Santilli that basically has the convex lens and the concave lens. So this is how you're able to see antimatter, which is also light, and you also have matter, which is also light. That is the main thing about the Vatican telescope, because they're basically trying to see entities from other dimensions that don't take corporeal form and entities that have the existence of physical matter. Now, for those who do not understand the quantum physics aspect of matter versus antimatter, now, the lithium atom is basically a noble gas, right? So you got 9 noble gases in the universe, which is carbon, lithium, sulfur, helium, hydrogen, xenon, radon, argon, and krypton. So lithium is one of the non-ether gases that creates matter, right? Which is a physical substance, which is carbon, dark matter energy. Then you also have antimatter, which is anti-lithium, which is an atom. So what I'm basically saying is, when you go to the next slide, one thing you got to understand about matter, because the photon hydrogen atom creates electrons. Electrons create elements, and elements create molecules. Molecules create organs, and organs create organ systems. And those organ systems create quarks. Quarks are basically leptons. Leptons are basically electrons. Those electrons have the ability to create physical existence in a form of trapped light, which is an amalgamation of subatomic particles, which are photons. So what the Vatican telescope does, it basically shows you beings that's basically able to take corporeal form. And the antimatter telescope of the Lucifer telescope sees antimatter, which is a form of ether for beings that don't take corporeal form, right? So that is basically the distinguishment between matter and antimatter, right? So antimatter is basically comprised of antiquarks. Antiquarks are basically protons and neutrons, which are basically neutrinos. Neutrinos is a form of light, false light, photons, right? So that is basically why because one thing you gotta understand, if extraterrestrials did not exist, why would you create this Luciferian telescope, right? Comprised of the same technology of the Galileo telescope and the Santilli telescope that has a convex lens and a concave lens. Antimatter versus matter, right? Which is based upon the frequency of light. So that's what the Vatican telescope, it helps you see into other dimensions. So when you able to see into other dimensions, when you have those interstellar vortex portals opened up on Mount Graham, this is where you're able to see certain entities and certain UFO phenomenon. Because if it wasn't real, why would you create that form of technology, right? So that's why, like I said, you got to use your discernment. You got to use your spiritual intuition. Everything is not a goddamn psyop. Everything ain't Project Bluebeam. Because like I said, they use westernized technology to hide the fact that we're going through the shift, right? Because when something does take place and some type of spiritual phenomenon, something supernatural, you might see an Anunnaki or a mothership or something like that, people are going to be like, oh, that's Project Bluebeam, when really something that actually took place, right? Because there's another, one thing you got to understand, that once you reach the apex of consciousness, we're able to transmute our biological vessels into the Merkaba light ship, to where we're also able to turn into UFOs. But that's a whole other video, right? So if Project Bluebeam, you know what I'm saying, if the Vatican telescope if it was created, why would you create that if extraterrestrials and UFOs didn't exist? That's all I'm saying. So everything is not subjected to a psychological operation. Everything is not propagated by the government. Ain't no way. So Even more astonishingly, the personal secretary to the Pope, now Saint John, related in the Pope John was visited by a tall Nordic being who landed flying saucer in the Vatican gardens. Now, one thing you gotta understand about the Nordics, a tall Nordic is basically a Pleiadian. You got two different factions of Pleiadians. You got Ashtar Command, and then you got the Pleiadians that work with the Galactic Federation, right? Just like you have two different factions of Anunnaki. You have the cherubim and the seraphim, right? Which is basically comprised of the Elohim. So this is also connected to the Majestic 12, because the Majestic 12 is comprised of Ashtar Command, the Insectoids, and the Draconian Reptilians, who is also known as the Archons, which is also known as the cherubim or the 200 fallen angel in the Bible, right? So it's not a coincidence that the Pope met with a tall Nordic being in the Vatican gardens, right? So one thing you got to understand about Majestic 12 is basically a proxy for the Department of Defense. So Operation Majestic 12 is basically talking about you have many different extraterrestrial beings, extraterrestrial biological entities that is comprised of grays, Zeta Reticuli grays, Draconians, and insectoids, right? So now this is all connected to everything that I was telling you about to prepare for supernatural phenomenon. Because there's a lot of shit that's getting ready to take place spiritually on the planet. Because I was telling you before, the star Polaris merges in the physical world with the spiritual world to where it causes a quantum entanglement, which causes a quantum fluctuation to where you're able to see apparitions and supernatural phenomenon on the planet. So now the Vatican is preparing guidelines for apparitions and other supernatural phenomenon, right? So why is that? Now, so with that being said, don't be surprised if the influx, don't be surprised if the influx of sleep paralysis is at proliferating numbers. So with that being said, a lot of people are going to be going through this phenomenon, this supernatural anomaly called sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when you basically have grays basically infiltrating your biological frequency while you're asleep. So it's not a coincidence that you're going to see a lot of things in your sleep when you're in the sleep state, because the sleep state, when you're in the theta state, the brain's in the theta state when you sleep, to where you're able to basically see into dimensions, basically. So like I said, you got grays that don't take corporeal form. You got some that are able to shapeshift. They can shapeshift into the ethereal state, and they can shapeshift into a physical entity. So you also got these ontological artifacts in the Vatican. So why would you put stuff like this inside the Vatican if extraterrestrials didn't exist? This is a Sumerian astronaut, one of the ontological artifacts inside the Vatican. Now we finna get into more theological context that proves my claim about extraterrestrial existence on the planet, right? So when you go to this publication right here, talking about the mystery clouds, are they UFOs, by Dr. Malachi Z. York, right? So when you understand the nomenclature title of heaven, heaven comes from the Greek word Oranos. Oranos is connected to the word Orion. Orion is a certain star constellation. So when you go to Amos chapter 5, verse 8, it tells you that heaven is in the Orion, right? Which is also known as the seven stars, where you get the TV show called Seventh Heaven, right? So when you also go to Job chapter 9, verse 9, Arcturus, Orion, Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, they talk about these star constellations in the Bible, right? That proves to you that you have extraterrestrial phenomenon. Also, when you go to where we at? So, as I was telling you before, one thing you got to understand about, certain apparitions and phenomena, supernatural phenomenon, is not only subjected to spirits or whatever, it's also talking about UFOs. So you can also have UFOs that don't take corporeal form, but where they're able to go into fourth octave ether. When they're able to go into fourth octave ether, that means that it's basically facilitating the technological devices on the planet to have a cloaking form of technology. So have you ever looked up into the clouds and noticed that sometimes they resemble certain shapes like animals or even people or even objects? You even seen clouds change colors when the weather is about to change in the shadow hours, right? So one thing you got to understand about clouds, it tells you right here in Exodus 13:21, clouds move strategically across the sky. They stop and they go and they illuminate at night. Then when you go to Exodus 14:19, the pillar of clouds led the children of Israel into their journey in the wilderness. And then you also go to the Holy Quran. It talks about the canopies of clouds, right? So all this stuff is connected to a form of a symbology of UFO phenomenon. Also, you go to Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17, during the time of the tribulation, where people will ascend up into heaven in a cloud. You don't ascend into a cloud, you ascend up into basically a UFO or so-called spaceship, right? Then when you go to Acts 1:9, it talks about how he was taken up, a cloud received him out of their sight. Then also, when you go to Revelations chapter 11, verse 12, in the second coming of Christ and to the earth. So it talks about, an amalgamation of clouds, which is basically light as a feather that has an illumination aspect. Only things that basically illuminate are UFOs or spaceships or whatever you want to call them, identify objects. Now you cannot, so what I'm showing you the hypocrisy of people who are stuck in monotheistic religion. They believe in, Jesus walking on water and all this other stuff, and Moses parting the Red Sea, but you don't believe in UFOs. You don't believe that extraterrestrial beings exist, but you believe all the other bullshit in the Bible, right? You believe all the allegories and mythologies in the Bible, but how can you negate something when they've been telling you about extraterrestrial existence in the Bible if you knew how to read it correctly, right? So it tells you right here in Luke chapter 9, verse 35, while Peter yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, right? Clouds don't, turn up bright. Anything that's bright has a form of a spectrum of light. Spectrum of lights or frequencies or whatever, that is all connected to UFOs and identify objects. So also, as I was telling you before, you have extraterrestrial involvement in the Bible and in the Holy Quran. So extraterrestrial, one thing you understand is that the word terrestrial means earthly, to basically reside within the Earth's atmosphere. An extra is basically an extra being that's coming to the terrain or terrestrial on planet Earth. So with that being said, one thing you gotta understand is that one thing about clouds, because we're going to see a lot of things in the clouds, because everything in our atmosphere has basically been manipulated ever since the solar eclipse on April 8th. So one thing you understand about the materialization of clouds, they have a form of convection. Convection is when you have radiation that's basically extracted from the ground and uplifted into the nimbosphere, right? And in the nimbosphere, clouds are basically supposed to move in the nimbostratus. Clouds are not supposed to rest. Anytime you see a cloud that's resting, that is basically a UFO using the cloaking technology by going into fourth octave ether, right? Ether is a form of a gas. Gas is amalgamated by a way of clouds and things of that nature. So I'm going to show you some more videos. because all this stuff is connected to May 17th, as I was telling you before.
On May 17th, 2024, the Vatican will release a detailed document providing guidance on how to discern supernatural phenomena, apparitions, appearances, or communication with divine beings, such as saints, angels, or Christ himself. The last time the Vatican released guidance on apparitions was in 1978 under Pope Paul VI. That document, Norms Regarding the Manner of Proceedings in the Discernment of Presumed Apparitions or Revelations, was released due to the increased influence of mass media. The miracle of Fatima in 1917 is perhaps the most well-documented apparition in the modern day. After an alleged series of appearances by the Virgin Mary to several peasant children that promised a public miracle, tens of thousands of people in Fatima claimed to witness the sun move erratically across the sky and produce radiant colors for several minutes. Project Bluebeam is a conspiracy theory that claims that NASA and other government agencies are attempting to implement a New Age religion with the Antichrist at its head.
And that New Age religion, I did a video on it, I did a transmission on it, and it's basically talking about Raelianism. Raelianism is basically a form of UFOology that's connected to a form of theology, right? So, like I said, Project Bluebeam, that is a real psychological operation that's going to be facilitated by the governmental elites. But one thing you gotta understand, everything is not fake. Everything is not a psychological operation. They only pull these psychological operations in these black swan events in order to propagate a certain agenda. Everything is not fake. Everything is not extracted by the government. Some things are actually happening, but that's what I'm saying. The government, the plutocracy, they have contactees that's connected to extraterrestrials, the malevolent extraterrestrials. They're in contact with them, and that's where they get their information from. So they get their information from them to understand what's going to be taking place on the planet, to have certain agendas that's aligned with certain phenomenon and certain spiritual things that's going to be happening on the planet, to hide the fact that we're going through a shifting process. It's kind of like I said, it's a catch-22 basically. Like I said, it's one of those things, they just try to hide their hand. They're basically trying to hide their hand. I'm gonna keep playing the video.
And start a new world order via a technologically simulated second coming. This theory was put forth by a man named Serge Monast, a Canadian journalist who published the theory in 1994. According to Monast, Project Bluebeam would involve several steps. The first step would allegedly involve faking discoveries that would discredit all fundamental religious doctrines. Then three-dimensional optical holograms and sounds would be projected into the sky, simulating figures important to various cultures and religions, which would merge into one after explanations of their individual mistakes. Telepathic electronic means would be used to communicate with each individual on Earth, convincing them that they're God.
I'm gonna pause this right here. So, I must interject and give you, this analytical, substantial evidence that I'm basically going to give you. One thing you got to understand, as he was talking about how there's going to be a so-called telepathic communication, this is why they want to merge humans with cybernetics, to create a cybernetic dictatorship by way of transhumanism. So this is why they want to implement Neuralink. When you have Neuralink, they put a stemmer receiver at the back of the neocortex to where it basically creates this dynamic that you get in telepathic communication from extraterrestrial beings on the planet, right? When really it's the government putting out frequencies in your brain telling you to do certain things. So like I said, that's why you got to be very meticulous and be able to decipher and discern what's going to be taking place on the planet when something actually happens from a technological standpoint. Because telepathic ability is real, but like I said, westernized technology is basically an emulation of our natural abilities. That's where it's basically extracted from.
Speaking to them directly.
I'm going to play it back a little bit.
Into one after explanations of their individual mistakes. Telepathic electronic means would be used to communicate with each individual on Earth, convincing them that their God is speaking to them directly. The final step would supposedly use electronic means to create the illusion of an alien invasion.
And mind you, you know what I'm saying? It's not a coincidence that iPhone, they put out those new those AirPods, right? That basically is able to listen to your thoughts and things of that nature. So, you know, you got to be very meticulous of all these technological devices that you buy and these new, all this stuff. Like I said, it ain't nothing but cybernetic dictatorship. And it's based on a form of a totalitarian government, which is a form of a dictatorship. All they trying to do is control people by way of the mind. That's why it's called government, to control the mental with technological devices. So this is why you got to be very meticulous of Elon Musk, basically. You got to be very meticulous of his so-called futuristic technology. That technology is basically going to be the precursor to the segue of the so-called Antichrist and how he wants to create this UFO religion in the future. That's basically going to be a form of Luciferianism.
Conception of the rapture and return of Jesus to manipulate believers into accepting the new religion. Monist claimed that his work exposing Project Bluebeam had made him a target for harassment by government authorities, which he believed was part of a campaign to silence him. According to reports and his own accounts, Monist and another journalist were repeatedly arrested and had their children taken away by authorities, ostensibly due to their involvement in publicizing conspiracy theories, which the government found disruptive or threatening. Monist attributed his legal and personal troubles to his stance against what he believed to be a global conspiracy. He ultimately died of a heart attack in 1996, which some claim was induced or somehow facilitated by government agents as a way to permanently silence him.
Not a coincidence. Not a damn coincidence. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wonderful time to be alive because we're going through many different changes on the planet. We're going to be seeing supernatural phenomena. So, though, if you do see something, don't think that it's fake. Like I said, just use your spiritual discernment. That's all you got to do. Your gut feeling, your gut will never lie to you. Never. This is another thing that I came across. It talks about the Antichrist, the Vatican, and the alien CERN disillusion.
This book was released, the United States Department of Defense announced a new UFO task force to find and identify UFO activity in restricted areas. Now, this book reveals the identity of the beings behind the UFOs, their connection to the Vatican, their connection to CERN, and the plans they have for humanity in the days ahead.
So, you know, what's crazy about this book is because I got the PDF, and this book came out in the early 2000s. And it's kind of crazy how all this basically lines up with the last few videos that I've been putting out, talking about the Antichrist, talking about extraterrestrials, and also talking about CERN. So all these videos that I've been putting out, like it's a piece to the puzzle. It is a piece to the puzzle. So for those new coming in, like I said, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, get the likes up. And if you know, I'm going to give a brief synopsis and a rundown. So the basis of this video was basically talking about the Vatican preparing guidelines for apparitions and other supernatural phenomenon. Apparitions are basically appearances or communication with divine beings such as saints, angels, or Christ himself, right? They're trying to prepare you for something. So the Vatican is preparing to release a document giving guidance on how to discern supernatural phenomenon. And it talks about how it's going to be published May 17th with a live stream press conference with the perfect for the dicastery for the doctrine of faith. So, like I said, May 17th is actually the day before the 40 days is up when you go to Jonah chapter 3, verse 4, when it says that Nineveh shall be overthrown. So it tells you right here, 40 days Nineveh shall be overthrown. Nineveh is another title for America. America is Mystery Babylon because Nineveh was connected to the Assyrian Empire. So Jonah chapter 3, verse 4, 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown, which is also known as America. 40 days from the solar eclipse, you got Saturday, May 18th, 2024. That is actually the day after the press conference talking about the Vatican preparing the guidelines for apparitions. Not a coincidence. So this is all connected to the solar eclipse because 40 days from Nineveh, it talks about the Pentecost. Then it goes into the Simpsons episode on season 16, episode 19, talking about thank God and his doomsday. And it shows you the date of May 5th of May 18th, basically. And at the top you got right here, it's got 144,000, not a coincidence. So it goes into many different publications talking about alien life will be found by 2025, the emergency action plan for alien invasion on Earth. And you got the schools doing simulation and drills talking about alien invasions. Then you got the Vatican holding press conference about extraterrestrial life. And then you got the Vatican preparing statements for extraterrestrial life. You got all this stuff happening all at once. Then you got the geoglyphs of the Pope's garments showing you the sigils of extraterrestrials that emulate the crop circles. Then you got ontological artifacts in the Vatican. Then you got the Vatican archives that holds 50 miles of information talking about extraterrestrials. So you got ontological artifacts of iconography talking about all this stuff in the Vatican. Then you got talking about right here why the Vatican basically removed the book of Enoch out of the Bible in 1408 when they hired Thomas Arundel. It was basically redacted because they said it was inconsistent with the Torah. So it goes into the fact it talks about mermaids because that's why they took the book of Enoch out. It talks about extraterrestrials. It talks about the sirens. When you go to the book of Enoch, chapter 19:2, talks about mermaids. And then you got the Lucifer telescope, and it talks about how the Lucifer telescope was basically built on Mount Graham in Arizona that's connected to the Sedona vortex. The Sedona vortex is an interstellar vortex portal to other dimensions. So that's why they built that telescope, because it's able to see matter and antimatter. So that's what's happening right now, man. All this stuff is taking place on the planet. Now, I'm going to, give a brief synopsis and a dialogue with you guys. So it's one of those things, man. If you think, something taking place on the planet, if it's going to be Project Bluebeam, or if you think it's really something that's supernatural on the planet, put it in the comments. Tell me what you think. Do you think it's Project Bluebeam, or you think it's something spiritual going on because we're going through the shift, right? So like I said, you got to use your spiritual discernment. You got to use your spiritual intuition. You got to use your spiritual abilities during this time period because you're going to need it like no ever. Otherwise, your ass going to get lost in the sauce. You're going to be connected to the technology that's going to be facilitated by the plutocracy, right? So it's one of those things where, everything. See, one thing that what they're trying to do, they're trying to commercialize, this phenomenon of spirituality to where you don't think it's real. Because anytime you commercialize something like that, people automatically is going to think it's a hoax, basically. They're automatically going to think it's a hoax. So we living in a time right now, it's very critical. You got to start using your pragmatic abilities, right? Everything right now, is based on prophecy. This is based on divine alignment. This is based on a form of cosmic order. Because like I said, we in the age of the true light. Everything is getting exposed. Everything is getting exposed, which causes a quantum fluctuation, a quantum entanglement. Everything gets exposed in the simulation. And that reason that is because, like I said, 2024 is the embodiment of karmic retribution. The karma is the exposing of the system that subjugated humanity for the last 6,000 years under the lunar cycle. So this is a wonderful time to be alive right now. You know, this is a time to get as much information as you can. This is the time you're supposed to be reading. You know, this is the time you're supposed to be getting your spiritual chakras in alignment. You know what I'm saying? You got to tap in and do your shadow work, because if these spirits and these apparitions and all this supernatural phenomenon, if they're infiltrating planet Earth, it's one of those things where you can be compromised as well if you haven't done your shadow work, because you have holes inside your aura. Your chakras is out of balance. Get your chakras in order. Start going to the gym. Start drinking more water. Start working out. You know, start reading more. Start doing things that are basically self-affirming, that puts you in alignment to reach the benefits of your higher self. Because if you at your lower state, and when these entities come in, when you're talking about the supernatural phenomenon and these apparitions that the Vatican is talking about, you're going to be infiltrated, right? So you have to look in the mirror and do your own self-realization. Self-realization puts you in alignment to where you become a master. You have to master yourself and learn yourself intuitively in order to reach the apex of consciousness. So like I said, it's one of those things, man. We live in very critical times. A lot of stuff is going to be happening. A lot of shit is going to be happening. So that's why, you know, you got to get with your spiritual tribe. You got to get with like-minded people. You know what I'm saying? The hell with your family. You know, don't nobody give a fuck about linking up with people from the past. Link up with people who was on your frequency. Link up with people who have the same thinking process as you. Link up with people who is your true spiritual family, right? That's what makes you family, by way of on how y'all connect on an energetic level, not because y'all damn blood or whatever. You know, that's a three-dimensional construct. So you got to see, you know what I'm saying? You got to stop seeing people for who they are. You got to see energy, because energy don't lie. So when things get tough, that's how you're going to connect with your spiritual family. You got to read the energy. You got to have the ability to read the room, right? Because a lot of people are going to be infiltrated spiritually as we go through the shift. You got to have the ability to read the room right before you go in that damn room, to see who don't like you, to see who's plotting on you, you know? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, get this video out there, because there's a lot of stuff that's taking place. There's a lot of spiritual implications that's going to be taking place on the planet. So get this video out there, share the video, like and subscribe, get the likes up, share this video as much as possible so we can, you know, tap into the algorithm so they won't try to suppress and subjugate the video. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, end of transmission.
10:14. We will put an end to this madness.
It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you, and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day, when I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. This a completion, the selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. Niggas try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery. Honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.